We have a lot to unpack with our next guest. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest joins us from our set in New York. Josh, we're sorry we're not there with you, but it's good to have you on the show.
A rare trip for me to New York, and you guys aren't here. I'm going to rearrange all the books on the shelves while you guys are gone.
Yeah, I had a feeling you probably were. That was kind of the no good you'd be up to. Josh, give an update about just give us an update about where the president. About what the president thinks about what's happened in the wake of this weekend. He gave a statement today. Just bring us up to date on where things are.
Well, I think, John, the first thing we have to do is we have to give credit where it's due to our men and women in law enforcement. We saw seamless coordination between state, local law enforcement officers and federal officials. You got, law enforcement guys on the street walking the beat, doing the good police work to track this individual down. But you also have, FBI experts using their forensic skill and technology to trace this person. And, in the space of a little over 24 hours, you go from a device going off somewhere in Manhattan to a name being released by the FBI as a potential suspect, and then that person just a few hours later being brought into custody. So this is really a testament to the heroism of our men and women in law enforcement. The investigation is continuing, and we obviously want to learn as much as we possibly can about this individual, about what may have motivated him, about what ties he had to other people who may have been involved, and obviously that work is just beginning.
Josh, do you agree with the Clinton campaign that Donald Trump, through the words he uses in the course of the campaign, can actually hurt America's security?
Well, I think there's no denying that the rhetoric that we've heard from a lot of Republicans, including the nominee, is contrary to our values and does undermine the argument that we are making against ISIL. The fact of the matter is the president has organized an international coalition to go after ISIL. And we've taken 14,000 airstrikes in Iraq and in Syria combined. We've had some success in taking senior ISIL officials off the battlefield, including 2 leading external plotters, just in the last couple of weeks. But we also know that ISIL is trying to propagate a radical ideology, a bankrupt, false mythology that they're establishing a caliphate and trying to inspire vulnerable individuals to carrying out acts of violence. That's why we need to make sure that we're not just taking the fight to ISIL on the ground. We're going to destroy this terrorist organization. But we also need to make sure that we're doing this consistent with our values and consistent with a strategy that doesn't allow ISIL to successfully make the case that somehow they represent true Islam in a war against the West.
Josh, you made a comment earlier today about how the battle between the West and ISIL is a battle of narratives. The Trump campaign jumped all over that and basically said you were completely out to lunch and out of touch by even framing the battle in those terms. How do you respond to that charge?
Look, there's no denying that we have starkly different views about the most effective way to take on this fight. But the rhetoric that we hear from Republicans does often undermine the case that we're making against ISIL. First of all, our first and foremost priority is protecting the American people, and that includes using our military power, our intelligence, our law enforcement to keep the American people safe. And the president has demonstrated a willingness and a success in making those orders, designing that strategy, and implementing it. But what we also need to be aware of is the fact that there is a battle that ISIL wants to wage of narratives. They want to drive a narrative that they represent Islam and that they are representing Islam in a war against the West. That is false. It is not true. The fact is there are millions of patriotic Muslims in the United States right now that are serving in our military, that are serving in our law enforcement, that are also our teachers and lawyers and doctors and nurses. These are individuals who are making an important contribution to our great country. And to deny that fact or to obscure that fact to win political points is shameless, it's inconsistent with our values, and it undermines our effectiveness to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
Right. And the rare exception to that are those people who've come here, become naturalized citizens, and then committed acts of terror here in the United States. Donald Trump and other Republicans say that the system needs to be changed dramatically to keep that from happening. Is that a fair charge? Are there things that need to change for vetting of people who come in this country to try to keep those instances, rare as they are, from happening?
Well, the thing we first should acknowledge, and this is something that our critics do not acknowledge, is the fact that refugees who come to the United States are subjected to more vetting than any other individual that enters the country. Certainly more vetting than somebody who enters on a tourist visa or on a business visa. Refugees have to go a background check. They have to undergo an in-person interview. Biometric information is collected about them. And then that information is run through a variety of national security databases that are maintained by our military, our intelligence community, by international law enforcement organizations. They are thoroughly vetted. what I will say is, if there is more that we can do to strengthen that even further, we're certainly open to that. But we shouldn't enter into a situation where we are doing something that some Republicans have suggested, which is essentially imposing a religious test on people who seek to enter the United States, a Muslim ban, basically saying.
But Josh, short of a religious test, though, are you saying that the fact that this happens on occasion is just sort of the cost of doing business, or we shouldn't accept the fact that some people are welcomed into this country and then commit acts of terror, and we should change the system to stop it?
What I'm suggesting is that the most effective way for us to deal with this is not to shut down the refugees process and try to erect walls and keep people out of our country. What we should do is seek to ensure that we've got strict vetting of refugees who are entering the United States. That's exactly what we've done. We also need to implement an effective homeland security strategy, both in terms of effective law enforcement, but also in terms of making clear to people who are at risk of potentially being radicalized by ISIL that they have a home in the United States. The president spoke very movingly about this earlier this year. He went to a mosque just outside of Baltimore and delivered a very personal message, a direct message to young Muslims all across the country, and made clear that they do belong in the United States, that they are welcome as part of this American community. And making sure that we're delivering that message, that's the most effective way for us to prevent ISIL from radicalizing vulnerable populations here in the United States. That obviously is paired with an effective military strategy that is going after ISIL, that is taking back territory and taking out their leaders. But we also can't lose sight of that important element of our strategy as well. And the president's determined to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, not only because it's an important part of our national security strategy, it's also consistent with our values as Americans.
Josh, I want to take you back to a couple of events of a couple days ago and point out what seems to me to be two events that seem to be somewhat in contradiction to each other. The first was President Obama on Friday, when Donald Trump, in that kind of a terse and tepid way that he did, withdrew himself from the posture of asserting that President Obama might not have been born in the United States, the birther day. President Obama came out and basically said, I don't really want to talk about this. It's not important. We got more important things to focus on. Literally the next night, you had him in front of the Congressional Black Caucus, as fired up, I think, as I've ever seen him in a campaign event, saying that if people don't vote for him, or for Hillary Clinton, that is, if people don't vote for Hillary Clinton, that he'll consider it a personal insult. It seems to me that he's pretty riled up about Donald Trump, and yet, as I say, around the birther thing, he seemed to try to slough it off. What's his emotional state right now relative to the cause of stopping Donald Trump from being president?
Well, I think the president is quite energized about this campaign, and he understands the stakes in this campaign. And look, the stakes in this campaign are not about about repudiating Donald Trump. The stakes in this campaign are about making sure that we build on the progress that we've made in this country over the last 8 years. Let's make sure that we build on the Affordable Care Act and expand access to health care to even more Americans. Let's make sure we build on the economic progress that we've made by continuing to raise wages for low and middle income families. And making sure that we're also continuing to reduce the deficit. Let's make sure that we are building on our progress in fighting the causes of climate change. Let's make sure that we are more effectively implementing a Wall Street reform strategy in the same way that strengthens our economy. That's what's at stake in this election, and that's why the president's fired up and ready to go.
I get all that, Josh, but I have to say, when the president starts using the phrase personal insult, if people don't vote for Hillary Clinton, it seems like it's more like there's something going on there that's more than just a squandered opportunity if Hillary Clinton lost. He seems to be very personally invested in this in a different way.
There is no denying that he is very personally invested in what we've done over the last 8 years. He's poured his heart and soul into the progress that our country has made, and he's so proud of the progress that we've made.
Right.
He was speaking to a room full of supporters, and he basically was saying, my name's not on the ballot, but all the work that we've done over the last 8 years is. So you need to get engaged and get just as fired up for Hillary Clinton as you were for me.